Council. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge, respect, and celebrate the Indigenous nations on whose treaty and unceded territories we're fortunate to live, work, and operate. With that, I have a motion to adopt the agenda. Move second. All those in favor, opposed, and carried. Approval of the public meeting minutes. It's been moved, seconded. All those in favor, opposed, and carried. All right, we'll move on to our public delegations. First will be Nathan Davidovich, and you have 3 minutes.
Either which one?
Either one works.
This one is okay?
Yep.
This one? Oh, thank you, Chair and members. BC Transit and TransLink need to order 500 new extra buses every year for 6 years in order to double the BC bus fleet. New bus depots, garages are needed. No reason why all the transit buses in BC are not being ordered together to get a quantity discount. The school districts in BC do that for school buses. Back in 2019, I talked to the Mayor Council about the above needs, but very little has been done over the last 4 years. TransLink has failed us on the North Shore by closing the 3rd Street Depot in 2016 and doing nothing for 7 years. The Marpole Transit Center is another example of delays, as the MTC could have been open now, but we have to wait till 2026 or 2027. Here is a quote from Transport for London. In every city around the world, even those with massive rail network, the bus network plays a very important role. But if you cannot fix the bus network, all the money on the metros is going to go to waste. If TransLink does not invite Transport for London to do an audit, then I will ask the BC government to do that, as we need an experienced transit agency to tell us what is the right path. One idea is building rental housing above bus depots. Transport 2050 is not ambitious enough and will result in very little shift in mode share. In Metro Vancouver, Lower Mainland, over 80% of the trips 24/7 are done by cars. Transit and active transportation account for less than 20%. Mode share has not changed for over 25 years. Transit fares for youth and for seniors and for low income. We need proper equity in transit fares, as it is done in many other transit systems. Victoria, BC has taken the lead, and the BC government, I'm sure, will copy the Victoria model like the Washington state government did. Everybody knows that the present 2008 governance structure is bad and is not similar to the governance of municipalities and regional districts. Transit is a municipal service, and governance should not be different. Municipalities were consulted prior to the creation of TransLink in 1998. However, many changes over the last 25 years without any input from municipal council. So we need proper consultation with all councils and the public. The public had very little say, especially since 2008. Public transit is an essential service, but it's still not treated that way in BC. Thank you very much, Chair and members.
Thank you very much for your presentation. The next speaker will be William Dawson.
All right. Good morning, and thank you for having me. This is a very exciting time for the regional transportation system of Metro Vancouver, despite all the challenges that we are facing. In particular, I am very happy to see that progress is being made on electrification. which will not only lead to great reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, but also to improved speed, reliability, and reductions in operating costs. Given that we are at this critical juncture, I would recommend to this council that we make our investments in this wisely. In particular, I would like to suggest that our greatest asset in this transformation is one that has already been bequeathed by our past, our network of trolley wires. I believe that this network should form the backbone of much of the electrification program, particularly where such wires are already in place. Wires have some clear upsides. They allow for lighter vehicles, allow for higher speeds, faster acceleration, reduced weight, and greater performance going up hills. The reduced weight also produces less wear and tear on roads, saving maintenance costs on those as well. They are more reliable than battery electric buses, have lower operating costs, and do not require any extra land or time to charge. Furthermore, battery electric buses, while they are improving, have had reliability problems in cold weather conditions, a problem that trolleys have not had. For example, in Boston, the pilot battery electric buses have had to resort to using diesel generators to provide heat in the wintertime, a problem that was never something that existed with the trolleys. The upfront costs of a trolley are similar or possibly higher than for battery electric buses, but the operational cost savings, plus the increased longevity compared to current battery electric buses, mean that lifetime cost per unit would likely be lower. The obvious problems with trolleys are the expensive costs of building wires in the first place, and the fact that they can only run on the wires. Fortunately, these are problems that have had a fairly simple means to mitigate them: in-motion charging, or IMC. This technology is hardly cutting edge. While this technology is rare in North America, it has been in service for years in many cities across the world, particularly in Europe, where legacy trolley wires are common. Cities from Prague to Zurich to Budapest to St. Petersburg use this technology regularly. This is not speculative technology. It is very well established. As one of few North American cities that still operate trolley buses, we are uniquely well placed to take advantage of this. IMC provides for the best of both worlds: the low costs and reliability of a trolley, and the versatility of a bus that is not bound to wires. This technology allows for instance, trolley buses to run as express buses in one direction as a local service on the wire, charging its traction battery, and then run back in the other direction as an express service off the wires, since it will now be able to overtake other vehicles. It would only take a fraction of the routes to be under wires for the range to be greatly expanded, particularly in cases where you have multiple routes running on the same corridor before branching. Given all these advantages, I would think it would be very well worth the time for TransLink to make this an important part of its electrification plan. They won't be usable on all routes. Battery electric buses will still have an important role to play, especially in places that do not currently have wires, and places where it wouldn't be realistic to build more. But the upsides where such wires do exist are overwhelming, and the downsides are small in comparison to a full reliance on battery technology. I heavily urge the Mayor's Council and TransLink to make the correct choice in this matter and be willing to learn from international best practices, especially given that our conditions are more similar to those than to most of our North American peers. Thank you.
Very much for your presentation. I'm advised that our colleagues online are having difficulty hearing, so we're just going to take a minute here to.
Pardon me. That's why. There you go. IT. I'm advised. I believe that wasn't the issue. I think the issue still exists. I'm advised that our colleagues online are having difficulty hearing or can't hear. So we're going to just take a minute to try and get that corrected.
We can hear now.
Oh, perfect. It was me. All right, moving right along. Next is a report of chair. Our focus as a Mayor's Council continues to be to advocate to federal and provincial governments for the support we need to return TransLink to financial sustainability, and more importantly, begin rolling out our Access for Everyone 10-year priorities. All of us are seeing the extreme pressures our region is under to successfully serve record-setting population growth, whether it's new housing, basic infrastructure like water and wastewater, recreation centers or parks, or the reason we're here today, transit. Our region is growing faster than at any time in history, and it's on us as leaders to make sure the essential services are in place to keep our region running. But we can't do that alone. It's too big of a job for local governments to take on with our limited resources without partnerships. Senior governments will need to be a bigger and more active partner than they have in the past to ensure that the 50,000 new residents arriving in Metro Vancouver every year can succeed, along with our current residents. If these new arrivals can succeed, our region will prosper and become a better place for everyone who calls Metro Vancouver home. That's why our Access for Everyone campaign seeks to bring Ottawa and Victoria on board to support our expansion plan. We cannot deliver what this region requires from TransLink without a renewed partnership with these governments. Because of that, I want to welcome and congratulate Mayor Olivia Chow as the new mayor of Toronto. Toronto, because of its sheer size and its transit system, and because maybe this has a little something to do with it, it hosts more than 20 members of parliament and most of our nation's media, is a powerful ally for us in our work to secure a new funding model for transit from senior government. The new mayor was elected on a platform to reinvigorate the TTC, which is facing many of the same challenges and pressures as us. And we look forward to working with her as an important voice on the national stage. I know that Mayor Sim and Mayor Locke, as our representatives on the Big City Mayor's Caucus, will look forward to working with Mayor Chow to ensure that everyone in our region is getting the service that they require. We'll be working hard, fighting hard to secure the support we need from senior governments so that we can collectively build our big cities for the future. Can I have a motion to receive the report? Move, second. Comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that'll take us to a report on zero-emission transit fleet. And there we are. Over to you.
Excuse me. Good morning and thank you. And is that audio working all right?
You bring the mic a little closer to you?
Is that audio
There, that.
working correct?
Yeah, it
Okay.
needs to be closer to your mouth. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. As you all know and have referenced, TransLink has commitments to double bus service over the next 10 years to meet the region's growing population, make transit the most convenient choice for everyone, and enable the region to meet the GHG reduction requirements of reducing emissions from light-duty vehicles by 65% by 2030 in order to limit global warming to 1.5% degrees Celsius. TransLink also has commitments to achieve a zero-emissions bus fleet by 2040. And as we are now in the process of expanding our electric fleet and facilities to include battery electric buses, and as the industry evolves, we know, and we're learning a lot, and we know that given the time required to transition to battery electric and the urgency to expand bus service and reduce emissions, in the near term, we can't only rely on battery electric buses. We can meet our climate goals. We need to use diverse low emissions technologies. Ralph is going to provide some further information on this.
Thank you very much. I think we're living in unprecedented times right now. Lots of our relations, family, friends, connections across North America being impacted by the wildfires, which has been directly connected to climate change. We have, of course, different levels of government, all levels of government committed to action on climate change. And those targets really are in service of us and our human health and the planet. The aspect of transportation plays a critical role, particularly in this region, to mitigate the effects of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And yet transit itself, transit's operations, our fleet and our infrastructure only account for 1% of regional greenhouse gas emissions. When we think about the 272 million people who took trips last year on our system, that is the greater overwhelming benefit that we're providing to not only the planet, but to the region. We are committed to serving the region. It's in our act to actually contribute to improving air quality in the region and reducing greenhouse gas emissions in line with provincial and regional climate targets. And we're trying all that we can with respect to reducing emissions from our transit fleet, but also in terms of our responsibility to plan and develop policies to reduce emissions in transportation writ large across the region. And the critical element of that, of course, is shifting modes into transit and other active forms of mobility, such as walking and cycling. There are no silver bullets to, addressing the climate emergency through our fleet and our operations and in the region's transportation system. It takes a multiple of policies and approaches to do that. But every time somebody gets on the bus, it doesn't take much to actually provide a net benefit overall to the region. And that net benefit is only going to become greater as we transition to low and zero emissions technologies. Corporately, we're committed to a 45% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of our fleet and our facilities by 2030, get a zero emissions bus fleet established and fully running by 2040, and net zero from an overall enterprise emissions by 2050. And those goals are fully in line with regional, provincial, federal, and global climate targets. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about some critical factors which are shaping our transition to not only a zero emissions bus fleet, but also to tackle the challenge of getting residents and that growing population into transit and really to become the most preferred mode of transportation, particularly for long trips in the region. When we look at our facilities, our transit depots, out of which our fleet is deployed, before the pandemic, those transit depots were already full, providing service. And this board and our senior leadership made the wise decision to continue providing high levels of service through the region, through the pandemic. As a result of that, when we look at transitioning and investments in infrastructure, fueling and charging infrastructure, which takes land and takes time, and take significant changes in those depots, it's very difficult to make that transition when the depots are full. We need actually extra land. We need more space to enable the services to continue to be provided as we go through that infrastructure transition. The second critical aspect is that as we expand transit service to meet that service requirement, that service demand of those 50,000 people more coming to the region every year, we've identified specific parts of the region and the amount of expanded bus fleet that we need to produce and we need to get online. That provides us with an indication that we actually need more additional land and additional infrastructure for fueling, operations and maintenance, cleaning and dispatch across the region. So a significantly expanded bus fleet to meet our 10-year priorities under Transportation 2050 is the second critical factor that we need to keep in mind. The third factor is in May, the province issued a consultation paper related to zero emissions regulations related to stock and fleet purchases to meet targets by 2030. And a portion of those regulations are related to transit vehicles and other parts of the regulations are related to medium and heavy duty vehicles. The targets are presented on the slide here, but they actually pose significant constraints for our ability to expand bus service and the bus fleet because of the timelines for fleet fueling and charging infrastructure. Second, we know that they are going to pose challenges as drafted to the ability for us to actually replace aging diesel buses within our fleet. And then the third aspect, we think that actually creates an unintended consequence of actually increasing greenhouse gas emissions in the region's transportation system writ large. So what that tells us is that we have to be very nimble. These factors tell us that we have to be very nimble and flexible and take a sort of polyfuels, poly-energy approach to transitioning our fleet while also expanding bus service in the region. We need to be very nimble as we develop our next zero emissions fleet transition plan. And the technology landscape is going to change. That's actually the last factor. So as we know, the Inflation Reduction Act and the California regulations related to zero emissions bus fleets and the following states that are underway to adopt similar regulations in the United States is pulling the supply chain in increasing levels of demand to meet those requirements. And that means that we actually see longer timelines for fleet and infrastructure procurement affecting us. And we also know that combustion technologies will have a limited lifespan as all of the OEMs transition to zero emissions. That gives us some challenges on how to design the proper transition plan in such a way that we can meet our service goals and our expansion goals. So, second part of this presentation is to give you a bit of an update on the different technologies that we're looking at to not only meet our service goals, but also meet our transitions to net zero by 2050. Just as a reminder, 77% of our greenhouse gas emissions as an overall corporate entity are associated with our bus fleet. And to be able to address that particular challenge, there are multiple technologies that allow us to tackle that biggest challenge with respect to our emissions. One particular strategy is switching the technology. And that means that as buses retire and as they age and they reach the end of their life cycle, we transition those to new forms of low or zero emissions technologies. So wonderful aspect of this is that most of those technologies have an electric traction platform, very similar to our electric trolleys, the battery electric buses, and the hydrogen fuel cell buses, which are coming onto the market. They all share an electric traction platform. But the second critical strategy, which is more of an interim transition strategy, is the use of renewable fuels. And by that, I mean renewable natural gas and renewable diesel to quickly decarbonize our existing bus fleet. And it also presents an opportunity for us, a transition or short-term opportunity to meet transit demand and meet our expansion goals using renewable fuel technology while the other technologies mature. So, electric trolleys are our roots. We know, as the public delegation just mentioned, there's new technologies. We actually have, in August, a demonstration new trolley coming on, which has this in-motion charge capability, which allows us to go off of the overhead and do routes up to 620 kilometers off the wires. And that presents us with a really unique opportunity to further take diesel routes off of our system. The other aspect is that we know that the transition to battery electric buses will continue. We're making considerable investments and will continue to make considerable investments in battery electric bus technology, but it takes a significant amount of infrastructure and capital to build the charging infrastructure, either in the depots or en route. I think you all know about the investments that we've got planned and we're making into battery electric buses, but I just want to say that that investment before the end of the decade is going to yield about a 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions overall enterprise. Our fleet is transitioning, so by the end of the decade, more than almost half of our fleet will be electric, combined with our battery electric buses and our electric trolleys. Lastly, the two other technologies I want to mention is renewable natural gas. We have 20% of our fleet is natural gas, and we are planning to purchase 100% renewable natural gas for that existing fleet and are expanding that fleet in the next couple of years to be almost 25% of our fleet. That renewable natural gas gives us an 85% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions associated with that part of the fleet. That is a significant reduction. It's not net zero, it's not zero tailpipe, but it gets us to a significant reduction in a very short period of time. And then the last two technologies are the hydrogen fuel cells. I would say they're about 5 to 10 years behind in terms of technology maturity. They do also require fueling infrastructure to be built and developed, which takes land. And the transition to hydrogen fuel cells we see primarily in the heavier duty, large articulated buses, and could pose a great opportunity for us to use that technology for rapid bus and bus rapid transit as we move forward and expand bus service in the region. And then renewable diesel is one of those things that we're currently testing and piloting. If it's successful, we'll be using it as a drop-in fuel to our existing diesel fleet to, again, rapidly decarbonize our existing fleet and meet our regional climate goals and our enterprise climate goals as well. It does come at a particular cost premium, but I think with that it's particularly manageable for us. So we're well on our way to achieving 37% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by the end of the decade, but we need all technologies to be tested and tried and implemented within our fleet in its appropriate way so that we meet our 45% reduction target as well as meet our service goals. So in the next 6 months, we are developing our zero emissions fleet transition plan, which is going to look at all of these particular technologies where we've already modeled all the energy used across all of the energy profile of all of our routes in our existing system, as well as the energy demand for all of our depots. We're going to continue to engage on the proposed regulation from the province related to a zero emissions bus stock and fleet purchase targets. And we're going to make sure that our transition plan does not jeopardize our ability to expand bus service and also be critical inputs into the investment plan next year and the year after that. So the key takeaways are that we're living in a really rapidly changing technological environment. We're living in an environment where there are new regulations possibly coming into place. And we're living in a time where we have to actually expand bus service when many of our technologies and our timelines to do infrastructure development are very, very long. So with that, I open it back up to questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Mayor Johnstone.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And just to speak a little bit to the delegates' discussion, can you talk about sort of what the long-term plan is around the trolley fleet? I don't expect that we're going to be planning to expand the trolley fleet and install new wires, but are we still going to be relying on that technology for the foreseeable future, or is there some point where we anticipate battery buses will replace the trolleys? Like what do we expect to see that fleet and that wire system reduced at all in the foreseeable future?
Right now, we actually don't see the existing trolley system and the overhead wires being changed. We've been net benefits from that particular investment and holding on to that investment. What we really want to do is we want to see how can we actually leverage that historical investment to actually achieve more. So that's why we're bringing in an in-motion charge demonstration trolley into the region in August. We're going to test it and see how it works on our particular system and what kind of upgrades we might need to do on our existing trolley overhead network to be able to have that in-motion charge capability. The second aspect, though, it does pose a really unique opportunity when we look at either rapid bus or bus rapid transit, where you actually have dedicated rights of way, where putting in new overhead lines are not as difficult as putting it through multiple jurisdictions in the region. And many cities and parts of Europe have very mature trolley systems with wonderful, mature, very clean, very quiet trolleys. And so we see that as actually a really interesting opportunity. But the existing trolley system will maintain unless we see that changing in the future. But right now, we don't see that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Yeah, I got two comments about questions first. The first question is that by going electric, we know it takes 15% more buses to cover the same area. So by accelerating electric, and I agree with your renewables, but even the provincial targets they have for us, what would that do to our ability to achieve, and how long would that delay our expansion of 50% more buses on the road?
Want me to speak to that? Yeah. So as you point out, because electric vehicles have lower range than non-electric vehicles in terms of how many kilometers they can drive before needing to be recharged, our analysis is that we would need to have more fleet to deliver the same amount of service, which will require more capacity at our transit centers. So I don't have a specific answer to your question. on exactly how much more time that will add, but it does mean that we need even more depot capacity, and well as at each depot, you need more space for each bus because of the electric, because of the charging facilities. So that is something that we are building into our plans, but also, contributes to the time required and the significant investment required to transition to a fully battery electric fleet, and which is why we are we are laying out that the requirement to rely on a diverse range of technologies.
Because in your report, the first line, direct staff to ensure a zero-emission fleet transition plan does not impede TransLink's ability to deliver transit service expansion. And I know we talk about zero tailpipe emission and everything, but the public, and I've been there 33 years, public wants service on the road. They want better service. The type of fuel technology that any vehicle is using isn't of consideration to them. Their primary factor is getting better bus service and getting more people on the road. And as was pointed out earlier, that the more people we can get taking transit would actually have a greater GHG reduction.
Yeah.
So I think, ourselves and the province do a disservice by when we say zero tailpipe emissions by a certain date is limiting our ability to put that service on the road that the people need and to get people into transit. And that's been a big problem we've had for years. I've been in this business a long time, and we have left people without the necessary service they need to take transit. We're also in an evolutionary time of technologies. I don't want us betting strictly on electric. It may not be the best solution. Hydrogen may be, renewables may be even better. When you have a bus and you purchase a bus, you're going to have that for 20 years. So if you make the mistake, you're stuck with it for a long time. So there's a rush to go quickly on this, but I think the rush has inherent dangers of making a lot of mistakes and not achieving the goals that TransLink would like to see. And I think from the Mayor's Council plan is to increase bus service by 50%. And I support the staff's direction on renewables as an interim measure, but that may be longer than what we think. Because really, I want to underline to my other colleagues here that we need service on the road for the people and to move people, and we'll get a greater overall greenhouse reduction in the region. So let's just be smart about it, not rush into one technology. I think sometimes with electric, we are rushing into it, and it's an evolving technology itself. The ranges on them are limited right now. And so I've been on new technology, and I've seen how it takes 2 or 3 years later, new buses ordered to get the kinks out. But that would be just my comment and recommendation to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Buchanan.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I'm just curious in terms of, we've had numerous conversations over the last several years with the province in regards to not just Transport 2050, but some of the financial challenges and how we're going to actually be, meeting our vision and our goals. And so I'm just curious, when these proposed regulations came out, or the paper came out in May, had there been any conversation previously in terms of where they were going with this before they decided to do a consultation? Just seems like we've been in conversation for years now, and now all of a sudden in May we have a paper that's looking at accelerating, getting us where we need to go. And I appreciate the urgency in that, because we all know why. But the reality is there is this, emerging technology that we're not too clear on yet in terms of its viability and sustainability. We do want to get service to people, but we're trying to balance all these needs. But it just seems like odd timing to me that we are now looking at something that's imposed new regulations that's going to hinder our ability to meet our objectives.
Yep, I can take that. Through the chair, we were made aware through the Clean BC Roadmap to 2030 that there was an indication that they were going to put regulations in place related to medium and heavy duty, and we've been continually asking, when was that engagement coming? when are we going to see drafts of that intent? It's really critical for us because it imposes or could potentially impose really difficult constraints on us, right? And as we develop a really good zero emissions fleet transition plan, as we develop our next investment plan, constraints are really important to have, but in the greater picture, we need to actually provide more service to the region. So we've been aware of that. We had a consultation meeting with them last week, and we put in our formal input on the consultation paper 2 days ago, and we expect to have more consultations as the months ensue over the course of the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And just follow up to that. So then, and perhaps this is more to.
Can you move your microphone a little closer to your mouth? There you
Sure.
go.
I'll move myself. Maybe this question's more directed to yourself, Chair, and Mr. Buda, just in terms of, so the advocacy that we've been doing in Ottawa and asking for acceleration of the permanent transit funding, in terms of the conversations you've been having with the province as well. How will that help us? Or are we now looking at having to advocate for more in order to, meet what potentially could impact our ability to deliver again what we've envisioned to be delivering?
Well, just to be clear, these are draft regulations.
Yeah.
And they are consulting, so they're looking for feedback. My honest guess is that TransLink staff, who are experts in procuring and operating transit vehicles, have only just sort of finished the analysis required for us to come to the findings and the recommendations in this report. Provincial staff aren't going to be as knowledgeable, so my suspicion is the province is going to take this input, if you approve these recommendations, to heart. And my strong suspicion is that the regulations will be amended to reflect essentially the very best expertise and advice probably in Canada on this question right now. So I actually don't think the regulations are going to end up being approved as is. They're going to be amended to reflect this, because otherwise, you're right, this would essentially add costs and delay our ability to expand. I don't think that's the province's objective. They just didn't have the information that we have and that you now have. And as I said, this is very fresh analysis. This is probably the first transit agency in Canada that's kind of arriving at these conclusions, but we know that everybody else is going to be getting to the same place. It just takes time to finish the analysis. So at this point, I'm not concerned. Okay. We'll have to see what, after we provide this feedback to the province, we'll have to wait and hear back from staff. And when we do, we'll come back to you if we need to increase the pressure on them if we feel like we're not being heard, or hopefully we'll come back with good news that we're going to work with them on changes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that comment. If I can just make a comment, Chair, I appreciate those comments, and I certainly have a lot of trust and faith in the staff and the work that they're doing. I would say, though, I think I don't believe either that this is the wish of the province, and particularly the ministers. However, I do think sometimes what we've seen is a disconnect between conversations with staff and what the conversations have been with ministers. And I think for all of us in our local municipalities, in the midst of a housing crisis, in the midst of a global pandemic, we had new regulations that were imposed upon building inspectors, which has dramatically impacted our ability to approve housing, get housing assessed, inspected, et cetera. And that was after the province said that the housing industry was an essential service in the midst of the pandemic. So I think we just need to be cognizant of that. I'm very optimistic, but I think we also, as the elected, have to be making sure that we're on top of it and advocating to our elected folks at the provincial level as well. Because I think at the end of the day, we all want the same outcome, and we all are trying to balance the many challenges in front of us. But if we're going to truly expand this and accept 50,000 new people each year for decades moving forward, we need to get this right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, seeing no further speakers, motion on the recommendation's been moved. Second, all's in favor. Opposed and carried. Okay, 4.2 is an update on transit depot planning.
Good morning. I'm Jeff Busby, Vice President Engineering at TransLink. Further to the previous report, the region has significant ambitions around bus service expansion and transitioning our diesel fleet to electric vehicles. Facilities, which we call transit centers at TransLink, are really critical to enabling both the transition to battery electric buses and to providing the capacity for further transit expansion. We have 3 projects underway to that end, renovations to our Hamilton Transit Center, our Port Coquitlam Transit Center to enable battery electric bus operations, and a very large facility with the capacity to charge more than 300 buses is being constructed in Vancouver in the Marpole neighborhood. There was a workshop with the mayors to outline some of the challenges related to further expansion of the bus system, and this report is a follow-up to that workshop in which we advised that a typical timeframe for a new transit center was on the range of 6 years. Municipalities are key partners in realizing these facility upgrades. TransLink is obligated to comply with land use, development, and building bylaws that are set by our municipal partners. And so it's very key to realizing these in a timely and predictable manner, that we have a good working relationship and a host municipality that is cooperating with the realization of these new facilities. As you see in the short report, we envision needing to begin the development of at least 1 additional transit center and then planning for many more as part of early implementation of the 10-year priorities. The report also sets out some observations from staff on how we can work better with municipalities to realize these facilities in 2 key areas. One is around aligning the city's own internal requirements of these developments. These are large industrial facilities consuming, in the case of our Vancouver project, more than 21 acres. They oftentimes come with a number of other upgrades that are needed in the municipality. What we're recommending is when a decision is taken to move forward with a facility, that we identify a key person in a municipality to become the advocate for this project, to help coordinate the requirements of the various municipal departments and help shepherd the project through its approvals process. We've also identified the need for considering streamlining approvals. This would allow for TransLink to deliver projects through some more innovative procurement models that would include early contractor involvement. Our typical approach is to move sequentially. This is a risk-based approach that we use primarily to manage approvals risks. So certainly an opportunity to accelerate the delivery of these facilities would be to explore streamlining the regulatory approvals that are necessary to move forward with these facilities. It's a brief update on the thinking we have on responding to your question on how to move these forward, and certainly welcome your questions.
Great, thank you very much. Mayor Sager.
Thanks very much. Just wondering if you've got any update on the transits, West Vancouver Transit spot. The ICBC building is empty next door, and I'm really afraid we might miss the opportunity of having a significant improvement there.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to provide an update. So the West Vancouver Transit Center is at capacity today, and there is, as you point out, a vacant site immediately adjacent. TransLink has expressed interest in that site. The province is going through consultation, particularly with First Nations, around the future of that land, and TransLink is keen to participate in those discussions to see if perhaps the property ownership can come to TransLink, which would allow us to expand that facility. Those conversations are ongoing, and we don't have a timeline for when they'll conclude.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Brody.
Let me just say that I read this report with a great deal of interest, and particularly the last page where it talks about opportunities for municipal support. Is support a one-way street? Is cooperation entirely dependent upon the cities?
Absolutely not. The cooperation is two ways, and I think specific to a positive experience, I can point to the Hamilton Transit Center, which was built in the city of Richmond, was the last transit center that we built, and many of our recommendations came from the positive experience we had there, where amenities that were necessary to build the facility were identified quite early, and we had that close alignment with municipal staff to move through the regulatory process. So I think. That's an example of the type of a relationship we're looking for. And we have a history at TransLink of having somewhat more challenging relationships in other projects. And that's why we're flagging the need to have strong alignment at the elected official level as well as with staff to be able to allow these facilities to move forward.
Well, it's of course of no surprise to me that you achieve this kind of a result in Richmond, but more generally, I would pay more credence to this list, which involves municipal staff, staff decisions, policy decisions, financial decisions. If TransLink would also say its approach to timely expediting the various projects. I just find this I just have to say I think it's a remarkable list that you're basically telling city staff to do its job, and I don't think they need TransLink to tell them that. And you're telling council what they should do and the policies that they should enact. I just hesitate when I look at this report, to say the very least.
Thank you for your comments, Mayor Brody. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I can add sort of an additional tenor to this conversation and just say that I think the bus depots are critically essential projects. I will acknowledge, and I appreciate Mayor Brody's point, that there are significant localized impacts when you are building a bus depot of size. Marpole is a great example of that. But I do think that the ramifications are significant of not having those facilities. We see it in terms of whether it's the procurement, the acquisition. I mean, the pipeline impacts are really noteworthy. And so I do think it's incumbent on us to work together in partnership. I think one thing that hasn't been brought into this conversation is also the notion of Indigenous partnership. Certainly that's a dialogue and an important one, I think, in all of our components or potential considerations for locations, particularly in Marpole with Musqueam, for example. And I think that we need to figure out a bit of a protocol about how we work together. I don't think that it is offside to suggest that there's a project champion there. And in fact, Vancouver would be more than happy to set a staff working group and provide recommendations and input into that. Those potential policy changes, because historically, collectively, whether it's TransLink or municipalities, we are slow in delivering major infrastructure projects. We just are. And I think it's in all of our best interest to figure out how we can collectively work together. Otherwise, I think we end up in a situation where we have these sort of disparate processes that go in parallel. And then that just delays the timeline as opposed to just a smart integrated project team up front that talks about what are the different respective roles and how can we, work to sort of move through some of those concurrently. And if we're going to look at opportunities, including things like housing near sites, et cetera, I think it's beneficial to all of us to have the conversations early on. So to me, this isn't about not respecting the role of the different municipalities. This is about how we work better together to actually get them built. And we are behind. And so the previous conversation around sort of electrification, they take more space. It's a bit of a moot point on the procurement strategy if we don't have somewhere to put them. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Asmussen.
Yes, my comments were similar to Mayor Brody's, but I'll say, I looked at one item here, consider transit a community amenity and waive other community amenity requirements. I think, as was pointed out earlier, we have impacts of bus depots. We have impacts of bus depots in our neighborhoods. Coquitlam has worked with TransLink on a number of projects where we've worked together with it. A project champion, I would think that probably TransLink would fund that position of staff through the city to be cooperative. But my other issue is better long-term planning. We're talking a 10-year horizon, trying to find depots to do a 50% expansion. We should know the transit and bus service by a growing area is going to need to expand. We're going to need more bus depots. So we should be looking at not a 10-year, we should be looking at a 20 to 50-year outlook of where we should have bus depots, identifying areas where we need to expand for bus depots, and then working with cities in a more progressive manner and not in a rushed manner to get those in there. So if they're identified early, developments by cities can work around those issues, the development, make sure that the development is balanced and protected for residential and stuff. So I would urge in the future that we have a better forward thinking and forward planning when we come to our bus depots and where we want to locate them. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, everyone, for your comments. Seeing the, oh, pardon me, Mayor Buchanan.
Sorry, Chair.
No apology necessary.
I would, through you, like to ask staff a question just in terms of the conversations that you've had with municipal staff in regards to this particular item.
We have not had specific conversations on the general concept of accelerating. We have obviously deep staff relationships to allow us to deliver the projects that are currently approved and funded. This is really something that we thought we should get to this body quickly, given that there was some discussion about the timelines required. Certainly, if we were to move forward with a plan that included bus expansion in multiple locations, we would consider having a kind of a regional level discussion. One of the challenges we have, and we have had some discussions with Vancouver staff on this report, is that each municipality has a different approach to its land use and development and building permitting regimes. And so there's a bit of a balance between how much of a conversation can we achieve at a regional level versus where do we need to work specific to the municipality that ends up hosting these facilities.
Okay, thank you very much. And certainly, listening to my colleagues, I agree with both or all three in terms of we need to work better together, but we also need to recognize that not every municipality, to your point, is the same size, and so the depth of capacity within each organization is going to be quite different. And, I'll just use mine as an example. We have a significant amount of engineering and transportation work happening. And so to say that we can pull somebody and be part of a project team, it would be a huge consideration that council and the CAO would have to be looking at. So I do think, to Councillor Esmundson's point, I think it's imperative that as we look to the planning of what's coming and what we perceive to be coming, that the conversations start much, much earlier in terms of the kinds of lands that we're going to need, where we potentially think they terminuses will, or depots will be, where stops will be, because as land becomes up for redevelopment, it's an opportunity for us to be looking at how we can get greater right-of-ways, but it also then is up to council to determine, do we give more density for that, et cetera, because private landowners are not giving it up for free. So there is a lot of, partnerships that do need to happen, but we need to do it earlier, because to ask us to do zoning changes and OCP amendments as for something that we've known is coming for a long time makes it more challenging and puts it right in front of a political nightmare, to be frank. So I think there's a lot of upfront work that can happen in early conversations. And I would just say that, or ask just around sort of any conversation or commitments around CACs or DCCs, what has been the conversation in that regard and the commitments from TransLink? Because that's another whole piece of this puzzle for individual municipalities, and we all work differently in that regard. That's a question.
Okay, sorry. First, I do want to say that certainly we are bringing much of the work that we've discussed today about the long-term needs and constraints and need for growth through the Regional Transportation Advisory Committee with staff, so they should have some awareness, and we keep working with them. I'd have to ask my colleague to speak more specifically to the CAC question.
The CAC question is an example of how different municipalities take different approaches. And so I think that the general notion here is, as we stated in the report, there could be an opportunity early in a project to consider whether this facility brings enough amenity that it satisfies whatever the relevant policy is for CACs. But I think that's likely a conversation that we would have to have with the specific municipality that's going to host one of these facilities. On development charges, our practice is, as with any other development, to comply with the development cost charge bylaw for the local government as well as regional governments. We pay our own development cost charge for TransLink projects, for example.
So the impact, of course, is those are just baked into the cost of the project, which then gets funded regionally.
Yeah. I guess my final comment, Chair, is just that, as we look to these big regional projects from this body and other regional projects from other bodies and our own work within our municipalities, at every turn, local government is asking to do things faster, give staff, give up money, give up land, and we quite frankly can't just keep giving without getting something in return. We're the level of government that makes the least amount of return on tax dollars. And so I think as people start to, we've got big challenges. But local government just cannot keep providing the things without some return. And so those are higher level conversations that I think we need to continue to have. And, the conversation with the province is, I appreciate the conversations they're having around crown lands, but crown lands, the province owns more land. We have other bodies that own more lands than local government does, and we just can't keep giving it away. So I think there's a lot of work to do with municipalities and how we can approach this from a regional perspective. But I think everybody needs to be at the table to have this conversation, including the private development community, around how this is all going to work as we have to deliver major public infrastructure that does not fall in the purview of local government.
Thank you. And I think we certainly acknowledge that. I think what our focus on this report was also came from a genesis of a request to talk about speed and how we could move through more quickly, knowing the pressure we have to the urgency of expanding bus service and the 6 or more years it takes to build a depot, and what could we do to have that faster, to do that faster. And so the report includes things that TransLink can do, and also things on the municipal side, which really primarily are about how we can move through approvals processes as quickly and smoothly as possible to reduce delay.
Yes, and I appreciate that. But every developer that we interface with is saying exactly the same thing. So we can only move as fast as our staff's capacity.
I think that totally understand your point. I think one of the things that our perspective is it what given the regional benefit that we're providing, are there opportunities for us to be managed a bit differently than a regular developer?
Okay, thank you, and we'll go to Mayor Locke.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Mayor Buchanan and Mayor Brody for their comments. I agree with them. I think it's important that we recognize every city is unique and has unique circumstances. And in this case, certainly this has significant implications for Surrey. And as we've talked about, Chair talked about growth, there's nowhere in Metro that's seeing growth like the South Fraser is. And so right now, we are at capacity with, as you know, I'm sure, with our transit center, and how we redevelop that is got to be immediate and done in a very, very massive way. So I just wanted to make sure that I commented on that, because I know earlier we were talking somewhat about capacity, but For us, it's just we must hurry up. It's not a choice. Cities like Surrey understand full well that we have to work, and this is a priority for us. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear and on the table. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for the comments and the discussion. Can I have a motion to receive? Second, all those in favor, opposed, and carried. Okay, and finally, an update on free transit for teens.
Thank you very much. I'll just say a couple of things. The purpose of this report is to provide the Mayor's Council with information regarding existing regional policy regarding fares, as we are aware that there are several organizations and local governments considering a proposal to make transit fare free for youth aged 13 to 18. Transport 2050, as well as the transit fare review that was completed in 2018 and endorsed by this body and the TransLink board, sets policy direction that transportation fares and fees should be linked to a person's ability to pay. Our assessment is that making transit completely fare-free for youth up to age 18 would not be consistent with established regional policy direction. And would have significant impacts. Fares, even at a nominal charge, help to allocate scarce resources, that is public transit service. And in cities that have experimented with free fares, the ridership has increased, but largely at the expense of walking, cycling, and carpooling, and we'd expect that a similar thing to happen in this region. Would be a significant financial impact, has many operational challenges in terms of visual eligibility on discerning whether somebody is in the eligible or not. Certainly, we acknowledge, we've long had discounts based on age. And that's typically been as a proxy for ability to pay. But I think in a region of growing inequality, we know that people's ability to pay is less directly related to their age, as there are people within younger people and seniors with higher abilities to pay, and people between the ages of 18 and 64 with very limited ability to pay. So our policy framework is focused on that. For your information, attached to the report, City of Vancouver considered a motion on this topic a couple of weeks ago, and the original motion, the motion that was ultimately passed unanimously by the committee, as well as the letter that I provided for their information, is attached to the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Mayor Johnstone.
Excuse me. Thank you. I have a few comments about the report, but maybe if the chair is amenable, I could maybe put a motion on the floor, and then we could to frame my comments. Is that appropriate at this time?
Some say yes, some say no.
Say yes.
I mean, look, a member has a right to make a motion. I mean, I'd like to hear from our speakers and then and come back to you.
Okay, well, I will. Maybe I'll make some comments, and then maybe if it comes back to it's appropriate. I'll say that, yes, New Westminster did bring a motion in support of ridership, free ridership up to the age of 18, but we did not direct it at the Mayor's Council, recognizing that it's not necessarily TransLink alone who has to address this challenge. It's a goal of the region and a goal of the province to change how people travel in this region. The Clean BC plan calls for a 25% reduction in vehicle kilometers traveled by 2030. We've talked about that around this table. We've talked about it with the Minister of Transportation about when he was present. But I don't think people understand what a fundamental shift 25% VKT reduction is in only, 6 years. And to achieve that goal will require nothing short of a cultural shift. I speak as a product of the UPass generation. I went to post-secondary at a time when we got UPasses, and it shifted my view about how I moved around this region. Because once you get hooked on using public transit, once you learn to navigate this region using public transit and realize how incredibly reliable and it is, it changes your patterns and you become a transit rider. You become a transit rider potentially for life. So not just choosing transit, but making different life choices in how you live in this region so that your lifestyle can be supported by challenge. So we have an opportunity here to reach out to every young person growing up in this region and get them hooked on transit reliability, to get them used to navigating by transit during an age when they're first finding their freedom. This is how we shift the regional culture. This is how we get to 25% VKT reduction. And we could do it by giving youth a chance to lead. So yes, I agree with your support that we need to look at equity in our fare system. And you ask my support to shift from age index concession fares to means tested ones. And where do I sign? You have my vote. But that's not what we're asking for here. Free access for youth does something very different than this. It has the potential of creating a culture shift that TransLink, the province of BC, and Metro Vancouver need to achieve their mode shift goals. The mode shift goals we otherwise have no idea how we're going to achieve. So a generation raised on transit reliance instead of car reliance should be one of our goals. So as this is one of the few tools available to us and to the province, I think that we should be asking the province through the Clean BC plan to support TransLink in bringing free fares to kids. And I will talk further to this maybe in the form of a motion, depending on how the conversation goes. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thanks, staff, for the update. I have a couple of questions. And one, I thought you made a comment, I'm going to paraphrase it back, that you said that for cities that had tried it, it come, I think, and I'm paraphrasing, at the expense of walking, cycling, and carpooling. Can you expand on that, provide a little bit more color?
Well, we certainly know that there are cities that have tried free transit. Often it's done within a constrained geographic area, and the experience, it's often done in say a downtown area where there's already a lot of walking and cycling, and when which is the mode we want people to use, most of all, is more walking and cycling. That if there's no cost at all to getting on the transit, then you know people like, I'll just hop on the bus for a couple of blocks rather than walking. For those people who are able to walk, we certainly think it's better sustainable outcome and allows for a better allocation of transit services for those people who are not in that position.
So based on, and again, I know that that's sort of one input in a couple of implementations, but is that challenging the assumption then that necessarily, do we know, sort of from a cause perspective, that it's really going to get people out of their cars versus, oh, it's an alternative and I could have taken a more sustainable route that I was already taking?
We know that the biggest driver to whether or not someone can take transit is the quality of the transit service. Is it fast? Is it frequent? Is it reliable? That's what is the biggest driver of choice of people if they're choosing driving or transit. Transit is already significantly cheaper than owning and operating a car, and so certainly our policy is that transit needs to be affordable, and we need to recognize that there are people who absolutely do not have ability to pay, and we need to have programs in place for that. Overall, to achieve the significant cultural shift, we need to make transit really super convenient, the most convenient choice for people, particularly for people taking long trips, and we need to make walking and cycling the most convenient for people trying to take shorter trips.
Okay, and then one follow-up, if I can, and that is that, sort of in respect to landing at the current position that's articulated in this report, where was the balance and where do you think it is now in the consideration between equity and sort of the GHG and the climate impact, right, in terms of taking the approach to more deeper discounts for more folks that are means tested, because I share Mayor Johnston's desire to do that, versus sort of looking at this through a climate lens, because I find now we're having a lot more complex conversations between where equity and climate butts up. So can you speak to the equity impact?
What I would say is that certainly we share that objective of, and TransLink established policy very much has the objective of those climate objectives of creating a system and a service that is desirable for people to use, so that they want to take transit and is the best choice for them. We also have policy that says, from an equity perspective, first of all, transit needs to be affordable. We know that that helps support ridership, and that largely that fares should be discounted based on ability to pay to really best deliver on those social equity objectives. Because while we, as noted in the report, certainly there are youth who do not have the ability to pay. There's also a significant percentage of youth who come from households that would have the ability to pay. And if it's free, it's essentially being subsidized by people who are paying, who may or may not have the ability to pay. So a more equitable approach is to base fares on ability to pay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask people, there's a little bit of an issue with the sound system. Hopefully they get fixed for tomorrow morning. So if you can try and please speak closer to your microphone, that will help all of us here. I've got Mayor Pahal, then Mayor Brody, and then let's try and drive this to a conclusion. Mayor Pahal.
Thank you. I'll try to use my outside voice for this. Just some comments. I think it's really important that we drive towards universal access. I mean, we know it is the gold standard for programs, especially when we're thinking about how young people can access programs. I know in Langley schools, for example, we have food programs. Obviously, those are geared towards people that may have challenges at home accessing food, but I know that the PACs and the different schools in the school district work very hard to make sure that there's no stigma associated with accessing these programs by making them universally available. And I think there's some challenges when we talk about putting the burden on people under the age of 18 to go and get means tested. Are you going to go to your parents and ask them for their T4 forms? And also, a lot of people may come from households where they don't have a real good relationship with their parents. For our programs in Langley City, because we have some, means-tested programs, if someone just asks for it, we just give it to them with no questions. But I really think, for young people, we should make the barrier basically zero. It could be a challenge, but I mean, at the worst, you stigmatize young people for their life. To what I think Mayor Johnston said, when you get people hooked on transit at a young age, you can make transit riders for life. I look at myself. My mom didn't drive a car, so from a young age, I was on transit in Kelowna and Vernon, and it really wasn't a big deal for me. And then when I moved to Calgary, I actually had a car, but I left it in Vernon because we had free transit on the, UPass program for Calgary Transit. And then when I moved here, it was just part of my lifestyle, and I didn't really think of transit being this foreign thing. On the flip side, I still think that we should move towards mean-tested access for people who are adults and seniors. I don't think this should be means-tested or free transit for people under the age of 18. It should be means-tested and free transit for people under the age of 18. Just kind of following up as a comment too, I don't think we're looking at those geographic things like the Portland Transit Mall or the free fare zone that used to exist in downtown Calgary. I think you're quite right. They weren't very successful. On the other side, I don't think that as municipalities, we should be paying for this. If it does get put forward, it needs to be 100% funded by the province. And I believe it needs to be available province-wide. And you may laugh, but I mean, this is the same program that they offer province-wide for people under the age of 12. So it's no different. It needs to be provincial. I don't think as a mayor's council, we should be funding this at all. It's up to the province. And finally, for the technical issues, the Compass card, we know that it's end of life. Maybe it's going to take some time for this program to be implemented, even if it does get legs. And I would imagine that once we get our Compass card system upgraded, then that'll solve the problem on the various challenges we have with transit fare structures in our region. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Brody.
I will
demoted you for a second there. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll be very short. We have no indication that any other level of government is going to help us out with this. It's going to cost us $30 million a year at a time when funds are very short and we're looking at significant deficits and we don't know how we're going to do it. We're doing this at a time when service throughout the region, it's one thing if you're in Vancouver to hop on a bus if you're under 18. It's another thing if you're in the heart of Belcarra to try and find that same bus. I think this is a very nice idea. I think we need to stick within the purview of the Mayor's Council and the limited jurisdiction we have, which is to talk about how we're going to invest the funds we have. And I say until we have a commitment from some level of government to pay us $30 million a year, I think that that's as far as it should go. We got money for 4 or 5 years or so from the government to fund the UPass. And after that, I don't think we've seen a single cent. So I think that we need to, as much as we like it, we need to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Councillor Kruger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll also be brief and just in support of Mayor Brody's comments. I genuinely appreciate the intention behind this, but making transit free will not have the desired effect that we're looking for if transit service is still inadequate in significant parts of our region, especially south of the Fraser. So should we continue to have significantly discounted concession fares for youth and for seniors? Absolutely. That's been a great policy that I, as well as many others, have benefited from. But again, significant parts of this region, including Delta, including Surrey, including Township of Langley, continue to be significantly underserved by transit. The best way to get more people to use transit is to improve access to transit infrastructure. And to do that, we need money. Everyone at this table has seen our projections for declining revenue over the next couple of years. I don't think we can afford to lose $30 million. And if senior government wants to step up, which I hope they do, I would love for them to step up and fund some capital projects from our Access for Everyone campaign. So until we have those projects funded, in my view, we need to look at actually getting more people onto transit by building the infrastructure. So I support the conclusions of our staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Buchanan.
Thank you very much. Through you to staff. In regards to the UPass, is it still, and I don't know the answer to this, is it still every university student has to pay for it regardless if they use it?
That's correct. The UPass program is not free. There's a fee that's paid by each student, and then they receive a transit pass. So certainly the day-to-day experience is that you're tapping your pass and you have unlimited access, but it's not free.
I realize it's not free, but whether you use it or not,
that's correct.
You have to pay for it.
That's correct.
So have they ever looked at the those who are not using that, so the funding from that being reallocated for under 18? Like, why are we making university students pay for something that they'll never
The way
use?
the UPass, and our CFO is here, and she may want to join me to answer this, but the way the UPass program pricing is set, as my understanding, is essentially distributing the total revenues by a full population base. So it's sort of self-funding.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, it is a program, and I will say that the students advocate for this program, which is also partially funded by the province. So TransLink subsidizes the program as well as we get funds from the province. But the universities vote on it. So the student bodies vote on it. So if they don't want it as a whole student body, they don't have to. We also have some exceptions at the university level where some students, I guess if they're not full-time, then they don't pay. But it also is a discounted price as well. So it's not the same price they would pay, and it's added to their tuition.
Thank you. Mayor Buchanan.
That's okay. I just wanted that just for my information, and I'm happy to hear what Mayor Johnstone has to say.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add a couple of comments myself. First, we're having a discussion about something we have no control over. I'll make that observation. Now, that's often the case at this body, unfortunately. So perhaps that's just par for the course. I appreciate the sentiment. I would love transit to be free for young people. I would love transit to be free for everyone, actually. I think that would be a wonderful thing. I do think we need to recognize the context and reality that we find ourselves in. We are going to the provincial government and the federal government right now with a very significant ask, which is we want them to completely alter the funding model for the transit authority so that we can deliver the transit service that people in our region need. I concur with the comments that have been made around the single greatest thing we could do to get more young people on transit, certainly in Port Coquitlam, is to have a bus that comes more than once every hour. That would be a good place to start to encourage more young people to get onto transit. So I do think we have to be cognizant of the context and the environment that we're currently in, the ask that we currently have in front of the provincial and federal government, and I'm concerned about injecting another ask onto it that, although could start with the provincial government funding it, could quickly find its way to, all right, we funded it for the last couple of years, now over to you, which is exactly what we're seeing with a number of the other initiatives that they have taken. So I kind of feel that our plate is full at the moment. I don't disagree with the sentiment here at all, but I do think we need to kind of prioritize and keep our focus. Mayor Johnstone, pardon me, I'll go to Councillor Asmussen, who hasn't spoken yet, and then Mayor Johnstone, I'll go back to you, and then I would like us to move on.
Thank you, Chair West. Our role here is about service, transit service. And as we know now, as Mayor West has just pointed out, we don't have the funds to sustain transit as it is right now in the future without new funding sources, without taking a bigger hole. And you're saying the province is going to fund it. We know the province only funds things for a couple of years, then turns it over to us. Service is the most important thing we need to put on the road. Secondly, as a former bus driver, it can be almost impossible for somebody to detail whether somebody's 18, 19, 21, 24 by their look. So that's the only thing you have to do. So you're going to make transit pretty much a lot more loss of revenue because a lot of people will take advantage of it because you're going to have to ask, and you can't ask for ID for somebody. So it causes a lot of other issues that you may not see as somebody sitting at this table, but somebody that's going to be operating the vehicle, you're going to lose a lot more revenue than 30 million because a lot of people will cheat and take advantage of it and move that way. So if you're going to do that, you're probably going to make it almost free for everybody. So it's a nice idea, but I think our focus should stay to where our authority is, as Mayor West has stated, and I think we should take that and move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor Johnstone, I'll go back to you.
Thank you. I find it interesting that I think everybody, I almost think it was universal. I heard everyone said, this is a good idea, but that's, I think, what I almost, I won't say everyone, I won't put it in everyone's, a common theme I heard, I would say, is that this is a good idea, but, which is why I'm not asking for the mayor, I don't want to ask the Mayor's Council to commit to doing this right now. I would like to ask the Mayor's Council to express support for this idea. The campaign is putting forward by the Centre for Family Equity, and ask the provincial government to include this as part of their Clean BC commitments. I think that it's important for them. I think it's important for us to tell the province that the free transit to up to 13 program is a good idea, and they should continue to fund it. And that if we do expand this program through Clean BC to 18 years old, the province should fund it. Having this group support it support it as an idea.
Sorry to interject, Mayor Johnstone, because your comments are along the line of what you already stated. What I'm going to ask is for you to make a motion. I'll see if there's a seconder, and then we'll.
Great, thank you. I can actually put the motion up in the chat for everyone who's online. And I'd ask that the Mayor's Council support the Centre for Family Equity in their Transit for Teens campaign, express that support to the Ministers of Transportation and Infrastructure, of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, and of Children and Family Development, and ask the provincial government to partner with TransLink by committing to long-term funding of the 13 and under free transit program, and request further partnership to extend the program to include youth 13 to 18 years old as part of the Clean BC plan.
Okay, is there a seconder? It's been seconded. We've just had a very fulsome discussion on exactly this. So unless there's any new comments, I'm going to call the vote. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's defeated. Okay, next, I need a motion to receive the report. Move, seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, next is a report of the Joint Task Force on Governance. Mr. Buda.
For sure, thank you. Well, the report's in front of you in your package. We've also discussed most of these elements several times, so I won't go through the details of the report. The purpose of the report is simply to seek your guidance on whether to move ahead with the recommendations from the Joint Governance Task Force to essentially implement the minister's direction to set up joint committees around finance, planning, and executive compensation and director recruitment, so that we can actually move ahead with, again, with the proposal that the minister originally proposed to us following our meetings with him last year. So certainly happy to answer any questions. Jennifer Breeze from the TransLink's corporate secretary here is to help answer questions too. Happy to answer questions, but again, this is consistent with the materials that we've discussed at this table before.
Okay, the recommendation's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or comments? Mayor Sager. Calling the question. Good. All right. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, thank you. That'll take us to other business. Just want to advise that the next public meeting will be on July 27th. It'll be held by video conference. Just to add some context, I've heard from a number of our members here that they will be away or be in places other than Metro Vancouver, as its summer will be upon us. So I'm going to use the discretion that you've provided me about determining when a meeting should be held by video conference, and this seems to be a suitable one. So unless there's a great objection to that, that will be our plan. Okay. With that, where am I? Adjournment. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll just have a minute or two to switch over